I'm Brodor, and obviously this is the Safe Space Studio, but I'm not wearing my jacket, nor have I properly done my hair. In fact, some of you may have noticed I have a more Durstian affectation for this video. That's because it has in fact been one of those days. Technical difficulties have abounded, and a proper release of today's interview episode was just not a possibility, which of course led to a delay in the releasing of the Brodor Why We Game Patreon. But fear not, viewers and listeners, everything is okay. You see, I wanted to make sure that you knew that things were still being done behind the scenes and that we were indeed paying attention. If there's one thing that I've learned from the passion that I shared for Jim McClure's Satanic Panic and his podcast Talking Tabletop, is that it's a real mistake to be incommunicado with the audience. And so that's something that I certainly can make sure that I can do. So even if the update is there's no update, you'll see these sweet buttery teeth to tell you, once again, I've shit the bed. But notice this, I'm not asking for money until I have a proper product. And once I get everything with WordPress sorted out, things will be a-okay, back to normal, and all that good stuff. Let me leave you with something. I love Savage Worlds. And when I finally do get that Patreon up, my $5 backers are going to have access to my video game master notes, where I'm going to talk about my Call of Cthulhu game and how we're using Savage Worlds to play students at Miskatonic University in 1953. But before I do that, for the people who do end up backing me and get access to that content, I wanted them to make sure that they had access to my review of Savage Worlds. But I thought, you know what, let's make this first one free for everybody. So here we go. Well, does that mean no video this Thursday? No, there will be a video this Thursday where I do talk about Blades in the Dark. But today, bonus content, let's talk about my passion for Savage Worlds. Now, this is the Suede or Adventurer edition of Savage Worlds, the most recent iteration of the game. And I've played them all to the beginning, including the progenitor, Deadlands, which, in my opinion, the original Deadlands was a big old messy pile of dookie, but in a lot of circles that'll get me punched in the mouth. For me, it is the stripped down, boiled down, flexible, fast, furious, fun Savage Worlds. I've played every iteration, and like my dad's wives, they've gotten better every time. Now this edition is no exception. But first, let me summarize the core mechanics of the game. In Savage Worlds, most things are going to revolve around what's called a trait roll. And your traits are going to be things like your attributes, both physical and mental, and the skills that your character possesses. Those things are going to be rated from a 4-sided die to a 12-sided die. Obviously, the 12-sided die is larger, has more numbers, and you're likely to roll a bigger number. Now, I'm not going to get into some wank about statistics and which is the best die to have and blah, blah, blah. That's for way smarter people who have much more time for pedantry. But for me, as a game master, super simple. Somebody has a D4 in something, they're not very good. Somebody has a D6, well, they're capable. Somebody has a D8, well, they're competent. Somebody has a D10, well, that person is an expert. And if somebody has a D12, they're exceptional. Now, skew your adjectives for physical or mental attributes, and you really have an idea how the mechanics of the game work in terms of your stats and your skill levels. Everything's rated from a die, from a D4 to a D12. If you're a special character, a wild card, like the player characters, you're always going to roll what's called a wild die, an additional D6. So if you have a D6 in, say, athletics and you're making a swim check, you would roll a D6. As a wild card, you'd roll an additional D6 and you would keep the higher of the two results. all dice ace, which means if you roll the highest number on that die type, you roll it again and add to that number. So if I rolled a 6 on one of my aforementioned d6s, I'd get to roll again and add that. All target numbers are a base number of 4 with modifiers that are going to range from ±1 to ±4. It's really, really that simple. If you roll 4 points higher than your target number, that's called a raise and you get extra success. It bills itself as being fast, furious, and fun, and I really find that it is. The game plays quickly. It's very easy to create NPCs and encounters and things on the fly. It's fun, and the combats can be very, very action-packed and visceral and big. However, the game is deeper than that. There's a lot of crunch that you can add in based on your individual flavor and the taste that your group has. For example, there are a list of setting rules that can drastically change the tone and feel of your game by which combinations of setting rules you add, which ones you use, and which ones you omit. Also, there are some excellent situational rules that you can use in your game for chases, for mass battles, for social conflicts like courtroom dramas, or dramatic tasks like defusing a bomb. There's also tons of additional material out there. Published material, free material, official product, third-party product. There's tons out there for Savage Worlds that you can really make the game your own. I mentioned earlier in the video that I thought Savage Worlds got better with each iteration, and I want to address 3 things specifically, but it's going to be a deeper dive. So if you haven't played Savage Worlds or you're not really into it, the rest of this video you're probably not going to find particularly interesting. But if you like Savage Worlds and you want to know a couple things that are new and different, or you hate Savage Worlds and you hope that I cover something like Shaken, just stick with me. Allow me to address Shaken. Shaken is the most derided mechanic in my experience of every edition of Savage Worlds. People hated the mechanic because it took away player agency. You just had to stand there and hope that when your turn came around, you got lucky enough to not just unshake or unrattle, shake off the shell shock, etc., but that you would roll well enough, you'd get a raise, and you could also take an action. For a lot of people, they were often neutered in combat encounters. It's totally unfun. In the current version of Savage Worlds, when you are shaken, you can still take free actions. You can still move, including running, right? So you can still yell, you can still try to disengage, you can still run away, you can still participate in the encounter and try to affect things in a better way. But more importantly, you no longer need that raise to take action once you've become shaken. So with a standard difficulty 4 check, you may become unshaken and still take your turn. Next up is power modifiers. There are generic power modifiers that you can add on to your particular arcane powers, superpowers, spell castings, what have you, by spending additional power points. So not only can you change the trappings based on the flavor of your character, based on the flavor and the aesthetics of your particular campaign setting, but now you can also allow for more versatility in the use of those powers. Last up is extra wounds. Now, there's way more that I could go into, but I think I've covered enough already. But extra wounds, and I mean extras with additional or extra wounds. You now can have extras that have 2 or even 3 wounds like a wild card. So you can have these monstrosities, these beasts, these gargantuan things that don't just go down because one player got lucky enough to shake them and then another player was able to cause that one crucial wound before the monster unshook. So you can have giants and dragons and things that are monstrous and terrifying. Or if you do like I'm going to do and you're going to run a Call of Cthulhu game, you use extra wounds for the monsters and they become even more formidable. So, you know, a deep one wild card with a 4th wound, for example. Anyway, I will give you more this coming Thursday when I talk about Blades in the Dark, and I'll give you an update too about WordPress and about the Patreon. Thank you for paying attention. Please tell your friends to subscribe. Please proselytize. Get it out there. Thank you. Subscribe.